Armando, pause the check run and keep those files on the desk.
We're processing district payments. Is there a problem with the vendor?
Once is a mistake, twice is suspicious. Jorge Armando Contreras did this hundreds of times across 17 years and left a paper trail for every single one. By the time agents searched his home, the cash had nowhere left to go except a mini fridge stuffed with bundles of bills.
We need to review checks written as MSD and later altered.
Those are internal accounting entries. You'll need the full reconciliation.
He stared straight ahead and said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Within hours, federal agents would pull bundles of $100 bills out of a household mini refrigerator inside his Yorba Linda home, unzip Louis Vuitton handbags stuffed with cash, and begin cataloging 57 designer purses bought with money meant for elementary school children. $16,694,942. 81% of the kids in his district were classified as socioeconomically disadvantaged, and the man hired 17 years earlier to safeguard their schools had spent every dollar of it on himself. I need you to stick around for this one, or the details get harder to hear, and the photographs you are going to see at the end of this story will sit with you for a very long time. If this case makes you angry, put that anger in the comments. Subscribe if you believe public school money should reach the kids it was sent to help. We do not look away from these stories on this channel. Jorge Armando Contreras was born in 1971, the son of working-class parents who had come north from Jalisco in the late 1960s and settled in the Anaheim flatlands of Orange County, California. His father worked in a citrus packing house off Lincoln Avenue. His mother cleaned hotel rooms near Disneyland for $1.65 an hour. They raised 5 children in a 2-bedroom rental near Magnolia Avenue, less than a mile from the elementary schools their youngest son would one day be entrusted to fund. By every account from people who knew him then, Jorge was quiet, careful with money, and very good at math. Teachers at Lincoln Elementary remembered him sitting in the front row with his hand raised. He understood fractions before his classmates did. He understood percentages a year ahead of schedule. He understood, even as a boy, that his parents counted every dollar they brought home, and that the school cafeteria lunch his family qualified for was paid for by money that flowed from Sacramento and Washington. Down through a district office he would not see the inside of for another 20 years. He graduated from Magnolia High School in 1989 and enrolled at California State University, Fullerton, on a partial financial aid package. He majored in business administration with an emphasis in accounting. He waited tables at a Mexican restaurant on Brookhurst Street to make rent. He finished his degree in 5 years and passed the Certified Public Accountant examination on his second attempt in 1996. His first job was as a staff accountant at a small CPA firm in Buena Park, billing $45 an hour to clients while taking home $21. He met his wife, Yvette, at a wedding in Whittier in 1998. They married 11 months later. They bought a small starter house in La Habra in 2001 and refinanced twice during the housing boom that followed. By 2005, he was a senior staff accountant at a regional firm, auditing municipal clients for a living, and had begun listing public sector finance as his preferred career track on internal development surveys. In the spring of 2006, Magnolia School District posted an opening for a director of fiscal services. The district sat directly on the streets Jorge had grown up on. It served the children of the same packing house workers and hotel housekeepers and restaurant cooks who had raised him. He drove to the interview in a used Honda Accord, wore a navy suit, and told the panel that returning to the community that had raised him was the most meaningful step he could take in his career. His references were spotless. His CPA license was current. His starting salary was $94,000 a year. His first performance evaluation in 2007 called him detail-oriented, fluent in California Education Code, and an asset to the district's long-term fiscal health. His second evaluation in 2008 called him indispensable. By 2010, He had been promoted to Senior Director of Fiscal Services with a salary of $131,000 and full authority over every bank account the district touched. He was 39 years old. He drove a leased Toyota. He brought sack lunches to work 3 days out of 5. For a decade, no one inside Magnolia School District had a bad word to say about Jorge Contreras. He coached his nephew's youth soccer team in the Anaheim Parks League. He served on the finance committee of his parish. He attended every board meeting in a clean shirt, presented every quarterly budget update from memory, and answered every trustee's question with a calmness that the board chair would later describe in court documents as completely disarming. Nobody at the district knew that by 2014, he was already moving money out the back door. Nobody at the district knew that by 2017, he had built a parallel cash architecture inside his own household. Nobody at the district knew that by 2020, he was wiring money to Mexico in 5-figure tranches under memo lines that read, construction door, stairs, and window, and, on one occasion, simply luxury jackets. He knew. He knew the entire time. Magnolia School District is a small California public elementary school district. It educates approximately 4,900 children, preschool through 6th grade, across 9 campuses in Anaheim and Stanton. 81% of those children are classified as socioeconomically disadvantaged, which is the polite administrative term for kids whose families qualify for free or reduced price meals, whose households earn less than the federal poverty line, whose parents work the kinds of jobs Jorge's own parents had worked. The district's annual operating budget runs into the tens of millions of dollars. That money comes from 3 places. The largest portion is the state of California's local control funding formula, which sends per-pupil dollars from Sacramento with concentration weightings for districts serving high percentages of low-income, English learner, and foster youth students. The second is federal Title I funding, which flows from the United States Department of Education, specifically because Magnolia's student population qualifies as Title I eligible. The third is a smaller pool of local revenue, lottery dollars, and the Student Body Fund, which schools use to pay for field trips, classroom supplies, year-end celebrations, and the small everyday expenses that make a 6-year-old's school year feel like something other than survival. Every public school district in California operates under a defined financial controls architecture. Checks above certain dollar thresholds require multiple signatures. Bank reconciliations are performed monthly and reviewed by senior staff. The district undergoes an independent annual audit performed by an outside CPA firm. The Orange County Department of Education reviews the district's books on a rolling basis. The California Department of Education and an oversight body called the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team, FCMAT, provide a broader statewide review function for districts showing financial stress indicators. In theory, no single employee should ever have enough unilateral authority to drain a district. In theory, the layers catch the thief before the thief catches the kids. In practice, the Senior Director of Fiscal Services at Magnolia School District had access to every district bank account, including the Student Body Bank account, held check issuance authority, prepared the bank reconciliations, assembled the reconciliation packets that other officials reviewed, and acted as the district's primary point of contact with the outside auditors during audit fieldwork. He was the gatekeeper of the gate. He was the auditor of the auditor's working papers. He was the man who told the trustees that the numbers added up. And for 17 years, every adult in that district trusted him to mean it. The mechanism was small. That was the first thing that made it work. Jorge Contreras did not write a single check for $1 million and walk away. He wrote checks for $3,000, for $4,800, for $7,200. He wrote them by hand on the district's check stock, in his office on the 2nd floor of the Magnolia Administrative Building on Crescent Avenue, with the door usually open and his desk lamp usually on. And he wrote them at amounts low enough that no one looking at the daily run of disbursements would feel the need to flag them. In the payee field, he wrote 3 letters with spaces between them. M, space, S, space, D. Magnolia School District. Anyone glancing at the check would read it as an internal transfer, the kind of routine interfund movement a district fiscal director processes hundreds of times a year. A board member's eye would slide right past it. A co-worker's eye would slide right past it. Then he walked the check across the hallway and asked another district official to sign it. The official, who had no reason to question Jorge Contreras, signed it. Sometimes a second signature was required. The second official also signed. And then Jorge Contreras took the signed check back to his desk, sat down, and began the part that the signers did not see. He added a fictitious payee name on top of the spaced-out M, S, and D letters. He altered the dollar amount upward. A check signed for $3,000 became a check for $13,000. A check signed for $4,800 became a check for $48,000. The spaces between the letters were not an accident. They were the architecture. They were the empty pockets in the payee field that he had built into the check from the beginning so that the alteration would look continuous, so that the ink would feel like one writing event instead of two, so that any later examination would find a name and a number on the line and not a story. Then he drove to the bank, sometimes the Wells Fargo on Imperial Highway, sometimes a Chase down Yorba Linda Boulevard. He used the ATM. He never spoke to a teller. He deposited the altered check into his personal account, walked back to his car, and drove home. He did this in 2014. He did this in 2015. He did this every year for almost a decade, until August of 2023. The reconciliation cycle was the second part of the architecture. At the end of every month, the district's bank statements arrived. In a healthy financial controls environment, those statements are opened and reviewed by someone other than the person who writes the checks. At Magnolia School District, they were opened and reviewed by Jorge Contreras. He assembled the reconciliation packets. He cleaned the line items. He matched the altered check amounts to falsified entries in the general ledger. He produced bank statements that looked, to the casual reader, exactly like the bank statements the bank had actually sent, except the numbers had been adjusted to hide the missing money. He handed those packets to other officials in the district. They reviewed them. They saw what he wanted them to see. They signed off. The annual independent audit cycle was the third layer. The outside CPA firm came in once a year, sampled transactions, requested supporting documentation, sat across a conference room table from Jorge Contreras, and asked him questions. He answered every question. He produced every document they asked for. The documents he produced were the documents he had built. The audit closed. The district moved on, year after year, audit after audit, sign-off after sign-off. By 2019, the lifestyle had begun to surface in places that should have been visible. The Honda Accord was gone. He drove a leased BMW into the district parking lot and parked it next to the assistant superintendent's 8-year-old Camry. The cuff of his shirt sleeve, when he reached across the conference table to slide a document toward a colleague, sometimes flashed a watch face that a curious colleague might have recognized as Cartier. His wife carried bags into the parish hall at Christmas Eve Mass that some of the women in the pews had only ever seen on television. In November of 2018, he made the first international wire transfer, $15,000 to a bank in Guadalajara. Memo line, building home. In 2019, 2 more wires totaling $31,000, memos referencing construction materials. In 2020, 4 wires. In 2021, 6. In 2022, the wires accelerated. The memos read door, stairs, and window. One read, almost defiantly, luxury jackets. Between November 2018 and May 2023, more than $150,000 left the United States, traceable to wires originating from accounts Jorge Contreras controlled, all of it ultimately sourced to a public elementary school district in Anaheim, California. He also built a front, a production company called JC Productions, advertised on Instagram as staging the best musical productions and live events in the region. The company had a logo. The company had a tagline. The company barely had any actual events. What it had was the appearance of a business, and the appearance of a business was enough to wave at anyone who asked how a school district fiscal director was paying for a $1.5 million home in Yorba Linda. At Christmas, he handed out $25 Starbucks gift cards to colleagues. The little envelopes were signed, with a small flourish, JC Productions. No one inside the district ever pulled the thread. The catalyst, when it finally came, did not come from the auditors. It did not come from the County Office of Education. It did not come from FCMAT. It came from inside the district, from people whose names have not been made public, who began in the early summer of 2023 to compare what they were seeing in front of them to what the reconciliation packet said. The internal review was quiet at first. A question about a vendor, a question about a transfer, a request for the underlying bank statement, the real one, the one pulled directly from the bank by someone other than Jorge Contreras. The real statement did not match the reconciliation packet. The numbers were different. The payee names on several cleared checks were not vendors anyone could identify. The deposit destination on a sample of those cleared checks, when traced, was a personal account at a commercial bank. The personal account belonged to Jorge Contreras. In August of 2023, Magnolia School District placed Jorge Contreras on administrative leave. The district filed a civil lawsuit against him in Orange County Superior Court within days. The lawsuit alleged that he had embezzled funds from district accounts through a long-running scheme involving altered checks and falsified reconciliations. The number in the early pleadings was already in the millions of dollars. It would grow. The civil case made the local news. Parents in Anaheim and Stanton, parents whose children walked through Magnolia's 9 campuses every morning, read the headline over their coffee. The district's superintendent issued a statement promising a full investigation and full cooperation with law enforcement. The Board of Trustees called an emergency closed session meeting. A retired fiscal services manager from another Orange County district was brought in temporarily. Jorge Contreras, on administrative leave, stayed home in Yorba Linda. He did not return calls. He did not give interviews. The driveway of the $1.5 million house held the 2021 BMW. Inside the house, in a mini refrigerator in a room not used for refrigerating food, bundles of cash sat stacked on the shelves. On the floor nearby, in a closet, 57 Louis Vuitton bags held the rest. He knew what was coming. He had known, on some level, for 9 years that this morning would arrive. He just did not know which morning. The civil case opened the door. The federal case walked through it. The Federal Bureau of Investigation opened a criminal investigation in the late summer of 2023. The Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division joined within weeks, drawn by the personal deposit and international wire pattern. The United States Department of Education Office of Inspector General joined as the third investigative partner because the embezzled funds included federal Title I dollars sent to Magnolia School District specifically because the district served a high percentage of low-income children. The investigators worked the paper trail. They subpoenaed the district's bank records directly from the banks, bypassing any document Jorge Contreras might have touched. They reconstructed the real reconciliation history month by month, year by year, going back to 2014. They mapped every altered check, every fictitious payee name, every ATM deposit timestamp. They matched the deposits to the BMW, to the Cartier watch, to the Louis Vuitton purchases logged on his credit card statements, to the closing documents on the Yorba Linda home, to the 8 bottles of Clase Azul Ultra Tequila purchased from a Newport Beach spirits boutique that kept very good receipts. The federal search warrant on the Yorba Linda home was executed in the fall of 2023. Agents in raid jackets and latex gloves walked through the living room, through the kitchen, through the upstairs office. They found the household mini refrigerator. They opened it. Inside, on the wire shelves, were bundles of United States currency, wrapped in rubber bands, stacked the way cash gets stacked when the person doing the stacking is no longer counting it for any reason other than to remember it exists. In the master bedroom closet, agents found the 57 Louis Vuitton bags. Inside several of them, additional bundles of cash were stuffed where personal effects would normally go. The photographs the United States Attorney's Office would later release to the public showed the mini refrigerator with the door open and the cash visible, and a single Louis Vuitton handbag unzipped on a countertop, with bills bulging out of the opening. The federal investigators also documented the 8 bottles of Clase Azul Ultra Tequila, a brand that retails in the 4-figure range per bottle. They documented the jewelry. They documented the designer shoes and clothing. They documented the international wire records. The full asset list, when traced and totaled, came to approximately $7.7 million in personal and real property that the United States government would move to seize. We are heading into the courtroom now. If you have made it this far, you already know this story is worse than any headline ever made it sound. Subscribe if you want to see how the federal system actually handled this case. We break down every detail right here, every single week. And these are the cases that mainstream coverage tends to bury. The forensic accountants closed the gap on the total. Every altered check, every falsified reconciliation entry, every dollar that had moved from a Magnolia School District bank account into a Jorge Contreras personal account was tallied. The final number was not a clean round figure. It was the exact arithmetic of a long, careful, patient theft. $16,694,942. Most of it had been spent. Some of it sat, in cash, inside a mini refrigerator in a Yorba Linda house. None of it had reached the children of Anaheim and Stanton, for whom it had been appropriated by the state legislature in Sacramento and by the United States Congress in Washington. The moment of confrontation was quiet. Jorge Contreras did not run. He did not resist. He did not throw a chair through a window. He sat at his own kitchen table in Yorba Linda, in a polo shirt and dark jeans, while federal agents read him his rights and showed him a copy of the federal complaint. The exchange, as captured on body-worn camera and later reviewed during the federal proceedings, was short. The lead agent told him the charges: embezzlement, theft, and intentional misapplication of funds from an organization receiving federal funds. Contreras nodded slowly. Agent: Sir, do you understand the charges? Contreras: I understand. Agent: Do you want to make a statement at this time? Contreras: I would like to speak to my attorney. Agent: That is your right, sir. Contreras: Can I tell my wife where I am going? The agent allowed him a brief moment in the hallway, in the presence of another officer, to tell Yvette Contreras that he was being taken into federal custody. He kept his voice level. He did not cry. He kissed her on the forehead. He turned, put his hands behind his back, and walked out of the front door of the $1.5 million Yorba Linda home that he had bought with money meant for first graders. He did not look back at the house. He did not look at the BMW in the driveway. He looked at the agent's shoes the entire walk to the vehicle. The federal indictment was filed in the Central District of California. The case was prosecuted by Assistant United States Attorneys Billy Joe McLean of the Public Corruption and Civil Rights Section, Brett A. Sagal of the Corporate and Securities Fraud Strike Force, and James E. Doctorman of the Asset Forfeiture and Recovery Section. United States Attorney Martin Estrada's office announced the charges publicly. On March 28, 2024, Jorge Armando Contreras stood before a federal judge and pleaded guilty to 1 count of embezzlement, theft, and intentional misapplication of funds from an organization receiving federal funds. The statute carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in federal prison. His plea agreement acknowledged the full $16,694,942 figure as the loss amount. He admitted to the altered check architecture. He admitted to the falsified reconciliation packets. He admitted to the international wire transfers. He admitted to the front production company. He admitted everything. Sentencing was scheduled for July 25, 2024, in front of United States District Judge Fred W. Slaughter. At sentencing, the courtroom was full. Magnolia School District board members sat in the gallery. A small group of parents from Anaheim and Stanton sat behind them. One mother, a hotel housekeeper whose daughter had attended Magnolia Elementary, addressed the court through a Spanish-language interpreter. She told the judge that her daughter's class had gone without a working classroom printer for 2 years. She told the judge that the field trip to the California Science Center had been canceled twice because the school could not afford the buses. She told the judge that the money this man had taken was the money that should have paid for those buses. Her voice did not rise. She did not cry until she sat back down. United States Attorney Martin Estrada, addressing the public after the sentencing, said it plainly. Instead of using his job at a public school district to help socioeconomically disadvantaged children, Contreras embezzled millions upon millions of dollars, which he flagrantly spent on a luxury home, car, and designer clothes and accessories. Today's sentence highlights my office's determination to prosecute and punish those who betray the public trust, especially when their behavior affects some of our community's most vulnerable members. Judge Slaughter spoke from the bench before imposing sentence. He noted the duration of the conduct. He noted that the defendant had not been pressured into a single act of weakness, but had built a deliberate architecture, year over year, audit cycle over audit cycle, while looking colleagues and trustees in the eye and signing his name to documents he knew to be false. He noted that the victims were children, and that those children would not be made whole by any sentence the court could impose. He acknowledged the guilty plea as a mitigating factor. He sentenced Jorge Armando Contreras to 70 months in federal prison. He ordered restitution in the full amount of $16,694,942. The federal government had already seized approximately $7.7 million in assets, including the Yorba Linda home, the 2021 BMW, the 57 Louis Vuitton bags, the jewelry, the designer clothes and shoes, and the 8 bottles of Clase Azul Ultra tequila. The mini refrigerator stayed in the evidence inventory as a photograph. Jorge Contreras is currently designated to a low-security Federal Bureau of Prisons facility. His projected release date places him in his late 50s. The Yorba Linda home was sold by the U.S. Marshals Service. The BMW was sold at federal auction. The Louis Vuitton bags were sold at federal auction. The proceeds of every sale flowed back, in part, toward the restitution figure that no single auction will ever close. Magnolia School District is still working through the audit and reform cycle that followed the case. The state's FCMAT review opened a broader examination of small district financial controls vulnerabilities. The Orange County Department of Education added a layer of independent reconciliation review for elementary districts of Magnolia's size. The children of Anaheim and Stanton are still going to school every morning. The printers in some classrooms are newer now. The buses for the California Science Center field trip ran again last spring. This case was outrageous. But the case waiting for you on the right-hand side of your screen will leave you wondering how the people in charge ever let it happen at all.